I met my wife in youth group before eventually getting married years later, but she's also been the more stricter one between us. And while I believe in being strict to a point, I believe there are some times when she's been unreasonably strict, times where I've had to step in and put my foot down. I remember when our son asked to skip youth group on a Friday to go to a friend's birthday party, but she said no because God is supposed to come first, and while I get that, I told her she was being unreasonable, along with how missing an occasional Friday wouldn't hurt. A similar conversation took place on one of his birthdays, when he wanted to sleep in, but she wanted him to come. I again chose to tell her that it wasn't a big deal, and although he was allowed to stay home in the end, she was upset in the car and most of the time at church. In addition to this, she doesn't want him to have friends who aren't Christians either, and that was one of the bigger arguments we had. When I asked her why she felt like that, she pointed to many mistakes that she made after drifting from God after graduating high school and thinking that she didn't need him, and that she was trying to help him avoid doing the same thing and stuff like that. I told her that while I understood where she was coming from, forcing him to do/go to something he doesn't want to, will not help him long term and only make him resentful later on, but she's convinced that he'll turn to drinking and other stuff like she did, and she often says those memories often stick with her to the point where she doesn't want him ever having to live her mistakes. The reason I'm writing this is because of our latest argument. She wants him to quit gymnastics because she thinks that being around a bunch of girls in tights is unhealthy, along with how God wants us to shield our eyes from things that could distract us from him. She also says the sport provides a lot of easy opportunities for him to become lustful in an environment that seems completely normal, and I already knew that trying to talk her out of this one would be almost pointless, but I tried nonetheless. I told her that while she can think whatever she wants, it doesn't mean that others will think the same way. I also told her that there's nothing immoral about doing gymnastics, and especially since he's passionate about it, but she said she didn't want him around an environment that often harbored girls of different ages, and that the last thing she wanted was for him to start looking at younger girls. This is where I snapped and told her that while I supported her desire to talk to him about purity, that she is wrong for putting her religious bias in everything and assuming the worst for our son. I also told her that she is wrong for assuming our son would think like that, along with how she's wrong for viewing gymnastics in that light. She then told me that she'll no longer drive him or allow him to go at the end of his current class, and I told her that she's wrong and constantly over the top about everything, along with how she's presenting a demented example of Christianity to him. I then went to bed, since I had work in the morning, and the conversation took place right when I was heading to bed, but she said wanted to talk to me first. When I went to work today, my son called me and told me what she said, that she had told him that this would be his last semester in gymnastics, along with saying that it is her duty to protect him while he lives under our roof. When I came home today, I wanted to talk to her over dinner, and I told him that he could take his food upstairs, but she told him that we were going to eat at the table, and when we were done, she said that her decision was final, since she is the one who has to drive him in the first place, and when I tried to talk to her, she didn't want to hear it. Eventually, I told my son that I would talk to her and not to worry about anything, and he looked a bit better after I said that, probably because he knew I usually sided with him, but I'm slightly torn on this one. She's the one who drives him, and she's the only one who can while I'm at work. I'm considering asking someone else to carpool him, but I'm disgusted by the fact that I even have to do that. But my main issue is how she doesn't want to renew him at the end of the semester, so I'm considering using my own money to pay for it myself. But since our finances are combined, I know she'll throw a fit about it, and there's still the issue of how he's getting there. I'm open to any advice that I can get to make this work. I believe that she's wrong and that he shouldn't have to quit just because of her assumptions, but I also know that the real issue lies within our marriage. I've suggested counseling to her, but she refuses to go, so I went by myself for a while, and it did do some good. I want to make things work, and I understand that she's been through a lot, that's why she's so adamant about him staying close to God. But I disagree with the way she's going about it, and I'm questioning if I'll ever be able to fully get through to her. Update 1. Over the years, I've been too passive about her ways. When she guilted him into wanting to skip a single youth group meeting to go to a birthday party, all under the impression that God is supposed to come first in everything. She also doesn't want him having friends who aren't Christian because she thinks that will push him further away from God, and I consider this a contradiction to the Great Commission that is in the New Testament. Not that I'm someone who advocates trying to bring religion into every conversation and come off as that weird person, but Jesus spent the majority of his time around people who weren't perfect saints, the opposite of what she's mandated. When she tried to force him to skip the party to put him first, I overruled it, taking the easy way out. When he wanted to hang out with friends who weren't necessarily Christians and she threw a fit, I wanted to tell her that that's a form of being prejudiced by judging someone based off an imaginary image in our heads that has nothing to do with their actual character and before even meeting them. But I took the easy way again and just told him he was fine to keep them, when I believed that shouldn't have been an issue in the first place. I did the same thing again in regards to the purity talks that she wanted to have with him too, and I agreed and let her have them, although I was rather quiet during the talk that we had, and I now regret and realize just how much of a mistake that was for these reasons. Being completely honest, this whole situation that has been brewing for years has made me grow tired of her religious nonsense and somewhat religion as a whole, since it can sometimes become a scapegoat for petty beliefs that people want to promote under the guise of something like that, and I think it's very manipulative. For years, I did nothing because the thought of separation and the opinions that would follow from our church and parents and friends would be overwhelming, considering how some really consider it taboo to get divorced even if it's none of their business. But, to be honest, I don't really care anymore. I've been growing more numb to religion over the past few years because of her, and after hearing her suggest that our son would look at girls in the very same environment that he's grown up around for years in a lustful way. Just doesn't sit well with me, and that's putting it nicely. She's sexualizing a sport and suggested that our son could become a predator if he stayed, and that has resonated more than anything else she's ever done, along with making me wonder if she doesn't have that kind of mindset herself already. So, what did I do? Before doing anything, I decided to talk to her one-on-one about the matter. I asked if she had anything against gymnastics personally, and I told her that trying to make him quit would only make him hate us. She replied something along the lines of how the world has a habit of making everything that isn't sexual, and that the gymnastics environment promotes girls in clothing that can be easily looked at wrongfully, then going on to say stuff about how God wants us to have clean eyes and stuff like that. When I suggested that perhaps she was projecting her personal problems on her, which I debated if it'd be too harsh to say, but chose to anyway, she just said no and didn't want to talk about it. I eventually asked if she'd be willing to go to counseling with me, a professional counselor who we'd find within the area. She said no, and then I offered talking to someone inside the church second, but she became defensive, and said that I was trying to embarrass her in front of her friends, to which I told her wasn't true, but that she wasn't cooperating when a marriage is supposed to be about working things out. She then proceeded to get upset and say that I'm wrong for allowing our son to stay in an environment where he'll grow older as younger girls keep coming in, and that it says a lot about what I'm comfortable about looking at, by allowing him to do so, and I was done after that, since I felt she was accusing me of being unfaithful simply because I don't think he should quit gymnastics. Sure, I could talk to other parents and try to arrange a carpool, and I could drive him myself if I could get off early enough from work on some days too, but I can't control what she does at the home when I'm not there, since she already talked to him behind my back on numerous occasions while I'm at work, trying to explain why she wants him to quit and whatnot, and if she doesn't want to talk or cooperate with me, then what more can I do? I talked to my son, told him that we'd be going up to my parents for the weekend and potentially a bit longer, and I was direct in telling him why. I told him again that I'm on his side and that she is sexualizing a sport and minors in a way that is very inappropriate, and that the last thing we need is to deal with that as he goes into his teen years. I also apologized for enabling her for so many years while being afraid of the idea of separation, and while I heavily debated whether or not I should be this direct about explaining everything at his age. I did because I didn't want him to feel that I kept things from him as he grew older and throughout this situation, and I also told him how it was making me stressed at work and unable to focus on my job, which allowed him to open up and tell me that he feels guilty about wanting to go, which I told him was wrong and that he has nothing to feel guilty about. But, the fact that she made him even have these doubts, is something that didn't need to exist in the first place, and my parents are helping me look into a lawyer and other ways to comfort him. A lot of this is on me for allowing it to go on for too long, but I just want to know how to help him with the guilt that he voiced in the aftermath of her words. Besides telling him that I'm on his side and that she's wrong, she's already implanted that doubt whenever he's in the gym now, and I just want to help him navigate it to the best that I can and undo the damage that her bullshit has caused. As for my wife, she didn't know that we left until after we got there, but I told her exactly why we had left, and she was slightly apologetic on the phone. I asked her again if she'd be willing to go to counseling, but she accused me of trying to manipulate her into going, so I told her to call back if she had a change of heart, but my main priority remains undoing the damage she's done to him while recovering mentally myself and potentially working through a separation unless she shows that she's willing to change, which I have my doubts about, considering we left and she still wouldn't consider counseling. Just being up here though, is more peaceful and needed from the stress of work and being in that home. Update 2. It's been almost a month, so I wanted to come back to this. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really tired at this point, and I wrote a lot the last 2 times, but I don't think I will this time because I'm really losing my energy about it. Basically, when we were still staying at my parents', I told her why we left and that I'd return if she had a change of heart when we first talked, but she refused to budge on her stance that it is inappropriate for him at his age to be in the same gym at little kids and preferably girls from a purity standpoint, since she believes that the world has a habit of turning everything that isn't sexual into something sexual, and she believes that the sport just serves as eye candy to lustful people who can watch girl run around in leotards, as she often points out, and she's told him this bullshit while I'm at work, and it drove me crazy. I couldn't focus when in the back of my mind, she's at home telling him shit that I'll have to undo later, and I've stated in my update that a lot of her behavior is on me for being lax over the years, but I'm trying to do better, but it's been really stressful and it still is almost a month later. When we were at my parents', we stayed there for a little while, but she began to tell her parents and mutual friends false things about me, to the point where her parents and some of them began to call me or message me on her behalf and call me a bad husband along with other things, and apparently she told them that I kidnapped our son, along with other things about how I'm this horrible person because of her lies, not to mention something about me putting my hands on her once too, which I swear never happened once in our life or even when we were talking Abu going to counseling. My parents told me that she was trying to guilt me into returning under her terms and that I should continue to stay with them because she has truly gone off the rails, and we've been here ever since, but I've taken a leave from work because my mind hasn't been in a good place for over a month, and that's from everything that happened at our house and the new lies and the stress my son feels and finding a lawyer and researching other legal things with my parents, and it's taken a lot of time out of my parents' lives too, but they've been amazing and I want to thank them when it's all over and even before then. From talking to the police and organizing documentation for them and my lawyer, I'm tired right now, and my parents are too, but we're still trying to figure it out and know that this will probably be a long process, and I don't care how much it costs to debunk her lies and get us both into therapy. My son, however, does not want to go, and I told him alongside my parents that he could go with me or alone only if he wanted to and that we weren't forcing him, but he said he didn't want to at the time, so we've left it for a bit instead of forcing the issue, and I've begun talking to one in my spare time online as well, and my parents are helping me pay for it a little. However, my son doesn't want to do gymnastics anymore, and he's still hard on himself for everything that's transpired despite the many times me and my parents have tried to assure him that nothing is his fault. All of it is mine for letting her go down this slippery slope for so long, but he's had no desire to do it and has voiced guilt about being around girls and making them uncomfortable without even knowing he was. But I told him that that was his mom putting that in his head and that it isn't true, but I regret going along with her desire to teach purity and keeping us in a church that ostracizes people for having an abortion, like one girl I mentioned in my second update, the same church that she has spread her lies to about me, and I have no intention of ever returning there again. In regards to his schooling, that's another mess at the moment. He hasn't been in class because she went to them too, and my lawyer thinks it's best to hold off on that for the moment for his well-being with others and the fact that she could show up there herself, but he wants him to go back sooner rather than later, and I do too, and I'm trying to see if there's a way that he can do most of his work online or something, but I'm still working on that at the moment. But most importantly, I'm trying to help encourage him to speak to someone for how he feels that's far beyond how I'm able to help him from a professional standpoint, and standing by him until he decides to do anything else. From a mental standpoint, he feels guilty, like I said, not just for what happened with mom, but about the things she said to him about him lusting after girls without him knowing it at gymnastics, stuff that I don't want him developing a complex about over her nonsense. But my other main priority is getting a divorce after this last straw. I can't take it anymore, and I don't know how much longer this will continue. Probably a while, but he's tired of gymnastics and not in a good state right now, and my parents think it's best to probably have him go to see someone sooner rather than later, which is why I'm probably going to make him go at some point, although I don't know the best way to do that without coming off as forceful in a way that he'll resent, and if anyone has any advice on how to make him go in a way that doesn't make him upset or resentful or unwilling to potentially help us with some of the legal stuff she might have said to him, although I know that that is not my first priority, I'd really appreciate that, as it hasn't been easy on him, and I just want it to be over, but I'm aware that this is the consequence of letting her get away with small things over the years that boiled into this, but if we can come out all right, then maybe we can both somehow be stronger at the end of it. Now on to second story. Crossed my girlfriend's boundaries by knocking on her door repeatedly during a work call, ending our relationship in the process. My girlfriend lives in my apartment complex and I met her one day in September while I was out walking my dog. We ended up going on a date that same night and pretty much instantly hit it off and started hanging out with each other almost every day. We would spend whole days together on weekends and we did so many fun things together. I really enjoyed her company and started falling for her. My girlfriend warned me in November that from mid-month to December 15th she would be unavailable. I thought that meant that I wouldn't be able to see her that often. I didn't know that it meant communication from her would become almost non-existent. She stopped texting me the usual "I miss you" or saying "good night handsome." It started going longer between texts. After a half week of this I talked with her and asked if she was okay, and if we were okay. She explained that we were okay, but she was just incredibly busy and all she really has capacity for is work and sleep, and maybe stopping to eat. But she apologized for making me feel anxious and said she would try. Well, time went on and it got to be 2 weeks since we had spent any time together. I had gotten to see her a few times for maybe 5 minutes in passing. Then my texts and calls started going unanswered. She had told me the last time we were able to speak on the phone that if I ended up getting off early enough on the following Saturday that I could come over for a bit and we could hang out. I called her that night and it rang to voicemail. I walked my dog when I got home, and when I walked by her apartment I saw that all of her lights were off. So when I got home I texted that it looked like she passed out and I hoped she got some good sleep. I didn't hear back for 3 full days. It didn't look to me like her car ever moved out of her driveway. I never saw lights on passing by her house. I started to get worried about her because I know she struggles with certain health issues, is super stressed and hates her job. It seems like she suffers from symptoms of depression. So I texted her just saying I wanted to check in on her, and it makes me feel worried when I don't hear back for this long from her. I still didn't hear anything that day. By the following day I was extremely worried about her. I couldn't think about anything else. I reached out to her best friend and asked when the last time that she had heard from her was. She told me it was the prior week. I expressed my worry and said I wanted to give her space, but that I was getting worried and I was thinking about going to check on her. Her friend told me that 4 days is plenty of space and that I should go check on her. I went home on my lunch break, and I walked over to her house. My anxiety was in my throat. It was still dark in her house from what I could see. Her blinds were all closed. I knocked on the front door. No answer. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked again a bit harder. No answer. I rang the doorbell again. No answer. I knocked hard enough that I felt like she would be able to hear it from the bedroom. No answer. I had my phone out with her text message up and I start seeing the typing bubble. I am on a fucking client call, stop knocking. I immediately left. I sent a text message saying sorry, I was just really worried about her. I thought more and added a little later on that I realized I went overboard with the knocking and I was really sorry. It went another full day and I didn't hear back. I talked to my father, who said it doesn't seem like she is communicating, treating you very well. I told him I just wanted to talk to her and I had half a mind to go knock on her door now, at night, just to talk with her and let her know what is going on in my mind. But I was worried about looking crazy or ruining things further. He asked me how much would change from how things have been going. At least if I did this and I could talk with her, I would have an answer. So I wrote a text telling her I was going to stop by in 5 minutes to just chat for a bit, and that was really important, that we talked. I went over and rang her doorbell. No answer. So I went home and wrote a text telling her how much I liked her, and how this whole situation was making me feel. How I was feeling like I was being ignored and being treated less than. How I needed some communication. How a single text every once in a while would go such a long way. I told her this wasn't you need to call me tonight or it's over, but I said I needed to hear from her. I woke up the following morning to see she had sent me a long text around 4 a.m. telling me how busy she has been, which I knew. How she has barely had capacity to even get to her desk. That she has been working 14-hour days and just crashing. Telling me that she'd already told me she would be unavailable. She said coming to her door while she was working and banging on it was incredibly uncalled for. She said her car had clearly been moved. She said that me doing that while I knew she would be unavailable, and she was at work, she works from home, during work hours is a hard line for her. I didn't know that unavailable meant zero contact or being able to see her at all. But regardless, in one fell swoop I ended my relationship with someone I cared about deeply. All because I couldn't get a grip on my anxiety and be patient. TLDR got worried about my GF after not hearing from her for days after she told me she would be unavailable. Went to her house and knocked hard on her door when she happened to be on a call. Crossed a hard line for her and now I am 99% sure I don't have a girlfriend anymore. Update 1. I mentioned at the end of my op that she had sent me a long text the following morning telling me how much I had fucked up and crossed a hard line. I did respond to that text with apology, saying that I did let my anxiety control me, and that I wanted to work on things, that I was going into therapy to work on my own issues. She didn't explicitly say that we were over, so I asked her for clarification on where we stood, if she was done. I said, outside of that, I would not contact her until I heard back from her. As of today it has been 12 days, she has not responded to me at all. The last 12 days have been horrible for my mental well-being. I decided yesterday to just move on and give myself my own closure. I realized a lot of important things through this experience. I realized that I didn't do anything wrong. Unavailable does not mean you disappear and drop off the earth for days at a time, ignoring the outside world. I did nothing wrong by going to check on her. I did what I did out of love, caring, and worry. I did what I would hope a partner would do for me. No one is too busy to text a single time in 4 days. I realized that I need to take care of myself and assert my own boundaries. I learned some important needs/expectations I have of relationships. I learned about my own codependent and anxious tendencies that I need to work on. I realized there were a lot of red flags about this woman that I was ignoring. In the past 12 days, I have taken up meditation, journaling, daily practice of gratitude. I have gotten into therapy, and back into the gym. I have talked with her best friend again, who hasn't heard from her in about as long as I have. The silence isn't personal to just me, which did make me feel a little better at one point. However now, I am still upset. I am mad at the way I have been treated throughout this whole process. I know this is an extremely busy time for her, and I know she is struggling, but I still have needs and she decided to be my girlfriend. Needs that she is apparently, for any reason, incapable of meeting. Leaving someone who loves and cares about you in the dark for 12 days, when you live a 3-minute walk from each other is unkind at best. I still don't know what is going on in her head, and I don't know if I ever will. I would still be open to talking with her, and hearing her out. I am extremely unlikely to take her back though. I deserve better. I think my biggest realization is that I can give myself closure, I can detach and take care of myself, and still love her and others around me. I wish I could snap my fingers and be over her, but I know it is going to take a little bit. Thank you for all the assurance, kind words, and those who reached out to support. TLDR, she still hasn't talked to me after 12 days. I am moving on. I learned a lot about myself and what I need through this. I wouldn't take her back at this point. For what it's worth from a stranger on the internet, good for you. Experiences like this can give us opportunities to grow, or they can leave us bitter. I'm glad you chose the former. Link. I had a similar experience, no knocking but will be busy, single mom/self-made at home food prep business type beat, sort of stuff for whole weeks to spend the whole weekend worrying if we'll do STH or we'll be too tired/busy to even get to do shit.